The station was alive with noise and light. 1,000 voices echoed across the metallic halls, footsteps ringing on steel floors, vendors shouting in alien languages, screens flashing with news from distant stars. Humans and aliens walked side by side, some suspicious, some curious, some lost in their own thoughts. Among them moved one human soldier. His name was Daniel. He was not dressed in battle armor today, only in his standard gray uniform. He had been assigned to the central hub, a place where all species met to trade, negotiate, or simply watch the strange parade of life. For him, this was only another long day of duty. But fate was waiting for him in the crowd. Daniel walked with his eyes scanning the endless stalls and holographic banners. His hand brushed past a rail as he turned a corner. The station was crowded, bodies pressed close, and the air smelled of oil, spice, and something faintly wild. It was in that crowded moment that his hand accidentally touched something soft, something warm, something alive. A tail. He froze, feeling the texture beneath his hand. It was not human, not metal. It was fur, thick, silky, and trembling. He quickly pulled back, but it was too late. The owner of the tail spun around. She was tall, towering over him by half a head. Her skin was faintly bronze, her hair the color of midnight fire, glowing faintly in the artificial lights, and behind her swayed a long tail, thick and strong, covered with golden fur. Her eyes narrowed, burning amber like a predator's. Her ears twitched slightly above her head, sharper than a wolf's. Daniel's throat went dry. He had touched her without meaning, but the crowd had already gone silent. A ring of curious faces formed. Whispers began to move like a storm through the station. The Beastwoman's voice cut through the air, low and filled with dangerous calm. "You touched my tail," she said, every word heavy with meaning. I didn't know," Daniel stammered, his voice shaking. "It was an accident, I swear." Her eyes studied him, long and hard. Her kind were known as Karathi, warriors from the outer rim. Few dared to even look them in the eye. And here was a human, fragile, mortal, who had broken one of their deepest taboos. The crowd expected violence. Some stepped back, already fearing blood. Others leaned in, hungry for the drama of an alien warrior's wrath. But she did not strike him. She did not raise her clawed hand. Instead, she stepped forward, closer than comfort allowed. Her tail flicked once, wrapping lightly around his leg, a strange gesture, intimate and binding. "My name is Celera," she said, her voice soft now but filled with iron. "From this moment, you are mine." The words echoed in Daniel's mind. He blinked, unable to breathe for a second. "What?" he whispered. Celera leaned closer, her amber eyes never leaving his. "In my people's law, when our tail is touched, the bond is sealed. I cannot walk away. I cannot ignore you. Until death, I follow." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some aliens whispered about curses, others about blessings, but all knew one truth. The bond of the Karathi was unbreakable. Daniel's heart raced. This had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. "Look, I didn't mean to offend," he said quickly. "It was an accident. I don't even know your traditions." But Celera only shook her head slowly. Her hair shimmered like flame as she spoke. "It doesn't matter what you meant. The bond has been made." She stepped to his side, tall and proud, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade, her tail still swaying, protective and fierce. Every eye in the station was now on him. Daniel's life had just changed. A few seconds, one mistake, and now an alien Beastwoman had declared herself his guardian, his shadow, his eternal companion. As he walked forward, trying to escape the circle of eyes, she followed, matching every step, her gaze never leaving him, her presence heavy, like a storm cloud that refused to break. He tried to shake her off, walking faster, turning through crowded streets, but she never wavered. Her tail brushed against him once more, as if reminding him that the bond was no illusion. By the time Daniel reached his assigned quarters, the whispers of the crowd had already turned into stories. Rumors were spreading. By nightfall, every corner of the station would know the tale of the human who touched a Beastwoman's tail. And Celera would still be there, watching, waiting, following. Daniel sank into the edge of his bunk, pressing his hands into his face. His heart was still pounding. He could not understand what had happened. He had only brushed against her in the chaos of the station, and yet, in the eyes of her people, he had tied his life to hers. Outside his door, he heard the scrape of armor against steel. He didn't need to open it to know. She was there, standing guard, refusing to leave. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel felt the first touch of fear, not fear of Celera herself, but of what this bond might bring. Because in a galaxy filled with enemies, secrets, and fragile alliances, an oath like hers could change everything. The station had grown quieter around Daniel, but whispers followed him everywhere. No matter which corridor he walked, heads turned, voices dropped, and alien eyes studied him with a mix of curiosity and fear. It was as if the whole hub was waiting to see what would happen next. And through it all, Celera never left his side. Her footsteps echoed just behind him, steady and powerful. Her golden-furred tail swayed like a banner, sometimes brushing his arm, sometimes wrapping close as if to remind him that escape was impossible. She stood taller than him, armored shoulders catching the glow of the station's lights. Her amber eyes burned with quiet certainty. Daniel tried to reason with her. He turned suddenly, nearly colliding with her chest. "Celera, listen to me," he said, lowering his voice so others would not hear. "I didn't mean anything by it. It was an accident. That's all. Can't you just let it go?" Her expression did not change. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she raised her hand, placed it lightly against his shoulder, and spoke words that chilled him. "In Karathi law, there is no accident," she whispered. Her voice was not harsh, but it was final. When the tail is touched, the spirit bond is sealed. You cannot undo it. I cannot undo it. Even death cannot break it. Daniel felt the weight of her words press against him like stone. "Spirit bond?" he asked, his throat tight. Celera nodded. "It means I am yours, and you are mine. You breathe. I protect. You fall. I lift. You run. I follow. This is my oath, sworn before stars and ancestors." The words were simple, but her tone carried the weight of centuries. The oath of the Karathi was legendary. Their warriors were feared across the galaxy not only for their strength, but for their loyalty. Once bonded, they were said to fight until the universe itself crumbled. Daniel staggered back. "This is insane," he muttered. I can't be responsible for you." But Celera only tilted her head, her ears flicking slightly. "You already are," she replied. Before he could answer, the sound of heavy boots echoed in the corridor. 3 figures stepped out from the shadows. They were not Karathi, not human either. Their scaled skin glistened under the pale lights, and their yellow eyes gleamed with cruel interest. "Human," the leader hissed, his voice like broken glass. "Is it true? You touched the tail of the Beastwoman." Daniel froze. His mouth opened, but Celera stepped forward, her blade half drawn. "He did," she declared, her voice steady. "And now he is under my protection." The scaled aliens laughed, a harsh and grating sound. "Protection? From you?" The leader sneered. "You've tied yourself to prey. Celera, you shame your kind. A human cannot carry a bond. He will break, and you will fall with him." Celera's blade slid free, the edge glinting like fire. Her tail lashed once, sending a warning crack against the steel floor. "Speak again, and I will cut the tongue from your mouth," she growled. The corridor tensed. Daniel could feel the danger rising. He could sense the eyes of hidden watchers peering from doorways and shadows, waiting to see if blood would spill. The scaled aliens circled, their movements slow, mocking. "Then prove it," their leader spat. "Prove your bond is real, or we will drag him through the station and show everyone what weakness looks like." Daniel's heart pounded. His instincts screamed at him to run, to escape. But Celera did not move back. Instead, she turned her head slightly, speaking to him without breaking her stare at the enemy. "Stay behind me. Human," she said quietly. "This is the first test. They want to break us before the bond has even begun." Daniel wanted to protest. He wanted to tell her he wasn't ready for this. But before he could speak, the leader lunged, claws flashing. In a blur, Celera moved. Her blade clashed with his strike, sparks bursting into the air. Her tail whipped sideways, knocking another attacker into the wall. The corridor exploded with sound. Metal scraping, growls echoing, weapons clashing. Daniel stumbled back, heart racing. He wasn't a coward. But he knew he was outmatched. His mind screamed for a weapon, for anything to help. His eyes darted to a loose pipe on the ground. He grabbed it, the cold metal trembling in his hands. Celera fought like a storm. Her movements were fluid, deadly, beautiful. Each strike of her blade sent shockwaves of fear through the attackers. But there were 3 of them, and even she could not block every blow. A claw tore across her arm, crimson blood dripping onto the steel. Without thinking, Daniel swung the pipe. The blow caught one attacker across the skull, dropping him with a cry. The crowd gasped. Celera glanced back for only a heartbeat, her eyes wide with something Daniel did not expect: pride. The fight ended as quickly as it began. The scaled aliens retreated, snarling, clutching wounds. "This isn't over," the leader spat. "You cannot protect him forever." Then they vanished into the shadows, leaving silence behind. Celera stood tall, blood streaking her arm, tail swaying. She looked down at Daniel, who still held the pipe like a sword. His breath was ragged, his hands shaking. "You fought," she said softly. "You stood beside me." Daniel swallowed hard, lowering the pipe. "I didn't have a choice," he whispered. Her eyes burned brighter. "That is the bond," she said. "From this day, you and I are one, no matter what comes." And as the crowd slowly melted away, Daniel realized something terrifying. The bond was not just tradition. It was alive. It was already changing him. The fight in the corridor was over, but the echoes remained. Whispers of the clash spread through the station like wildfire. By the next cycle, every alien trader, guard, and worker knew the story. How a human had struck a scaled warrior with nothing but a pipe, and how a Beastwoman had stood to defend him as if he were her own blood. Daniel walked the halls with Celera at his side, and though he tried to look calm, his stomach churned with unease. Everywhere he went, eyes followed, some with awe, others with jealousy, many with hatred. He had become a symbol without meaning to, and symbols always attracted danger. Celera moved with quiet pride. Her wound from the fight was wrapped in fresh bandages, but her stride had not weakened. She walked tall, her tail swaying in a rhythm that warned others to keep their distance. Her hand often rested near the hilt of her blade, and her gaze scanned every shadow as if she knew another attack was near. "Why are they staring at us?" Daniel whispered as they passed a group of reptilian merchants who quickly lowered their heads when Celera's eyes flicked toward them. "Because you touched my tail," she said simply. "And because you fought." Daniel sighed. "I didn't fight. I swung a pipe once. That doesn't make me a warrior." Celera stopped, forcing him to pause as well. Her amber eyes burned into his. "To my people, it does. You stood. When others would have run, you swung. When others would have begged, that is enough." Daniel looked away, uneasy with her intensity. He didn't want to be anyone's symbol. He didn't want the bond, the whispers, the eyes that never left him. All he wanted was his simple duty on the station. But fate had tied him to something larger. That night, Daniel returned to his quarters. Celera stationed herself outside his door as always, refusing to leave. He tried to sleep, but his mind twisted with restless thoughts. The sound of voices in the corridor kept him awake, harsh whispers in a language he didn't know. He pressed his ear to the cold wall, listening. "The bond makes him vulnerable," one voice hissed. "Strike the human, and she will break," another answered. "If the Beastwoman falls, the others will see her weakness." Daniel's blood ran cold. The voices faded, footsteps moving away, but the meaning was clear. There were more enemies watching, more than just the 3 scaled warriors, and they were planning something worse. The next morning, Celera entered his quarters without knocking. Her tail brushed the doorway before curling lightly around her waist like a second belt. She studied him, eyes sharp. "You heard them, didn't you?" she asked. Daniel blinked. "You knew?" "I always know when predators stalk," she replied. "They are testing us, waiting for the right moment. They believe hurting you will shatter me. They do not understand." Daniel frowned. "Understand what?" Celera's hand rested lightly on her blade. "That I am not bound because I am weak. I am bound because I choose strength. With or without you, I will not break." Her words gave him little comfort, but before he could answer, the station's alarm blared. A deep, thrumming siren shook the walls, lights flashing crimson along the ceiling. Doors slammed shut as guards rushed through the halls. Attention! The mechanical voice of the station AI called out. Security breach detected in lower cargo sectors. All civilians remain in safe zones. Solara's ears twitched. She turned to Daniel, her voice low and urgent. This is no accident. This is their move. Daniel felt his chest tighten. What do you mean? They will not strike in the open again, she said, eyes narrowing. They will hunt us where no one can see. They want blood in the shadows. Daniel followed as Solara pushed through the crowded corridors, her movements fast but graceful. Her hand gripped his wrist firmly, dragging him past panicked civilians and armed guards. She led him down a quieter path, away from the flow of traffic. The deeper they went, the darker the station became. The polished steel of the upper halls gave way to rusted pipes, flickering lights, and the smell of damp oil. The sound of dripping water echoed through the cargo tunnels. Daniel's skin prickled. He could feel eyes on him. Watching from the shadows, Solara slowed, her tail flicking like a whip. They are here, she whispered. Shapes emerged from the darkness. More than before, half a dozen scaled warriors, their claws glinting, their yellow eyes burning with malice. They spread out in a circle, trapping the human and the Beastwoman between crates and broken machinery. The leader stepped forward, the same scarred warrior Daniel had struck with the pipe. His sneer revealed jagged teeth. You embarrassed me in front of the station. Human, now you will pay. Solara drew her blade, its metal singing in the stale air. Her stance was solid, unyielding. Her voice rang like iron. You will not touch him. The leader hissed. You cannot protect him forever. Beastwoman, you will bleed. And when you fall, everyone will see the truth of your weakness. Daniel's heart pounded as the circle closed in. He knew he was no warrior, but he also knew this was no ordinary fight. This was the moment that would decide if the bond was curse or strength. Solara's tail flicked against his leg, not in anger, but in reassurance. Her voice lowered, meant only for him. Stay close. Watch. Learn. This is how we survive. And then the shadows exploded into motion. The circle of enemies tightened, claws glinting in the dim cargo light. The air was thick with the smell of rust, oil, and tension. Daniel's grip tightened around the metal pipe he had carried from the last fight. His palms were slick with sweat, his heart beat like thunder in his ears. Solara stood in front of him, her shoulders squared, her blade angled low but steady. Her golden-furred tail moved behind her in slow arcs, a predator's rhythm. She did not look afraid. Instead, she looked alive, as if every muscle in her body was waiting for this exact moment. The leader of the scaled warriors sneered, his teeth flashing like broken glass. You should have run when you had the chance, human, he hissed. Now you will die in the dark, and your Beastwoman will be nothing but a broken oath. Solara's voice cut through his threat like steel. Try, she said. The first attacker lunged, claws slashing through the air. Solara's blade caught the strike with a ringing spark. She twisted, tail whipping around to slam into the chest of another warrior, sending him crashing into a crate. The fight had begun. Daniel stumbled back, nearly tripping over a coil of cables. He swung his pipe wildly when another enemy came too close. The blow missed, but the sound of his desperate swing was enough to force the warrior to hesitate. Solara moved like fire. Her strikes were precise, not wasted, every cut of her blade carrying deadly weight. Sparks flew each time steel met claw. Her tail lashed with equal force, striking, sweeping, throwing attackers off balance. But there were too many. 6 warriors surrounded them, and for every strike Solara landed, another claw came for her flank. A slash tore across her shoulder, blood spilling bright against her bronze skin. She did not flinch. She only fought harder. Daniel's chest ached as he watched. He could not just stand there, not while she bled for him. He gripped the pipe tighter, forcing his legs to move, forcing himself forward. One of the scaled warriors leapt at him, jaws wide. Daniel ducked instinctively, swinging the pipe upward. It connected with a sickening crack. The warrior screamed, collapsing to the ground. Daniel gasped, shocked at his own strength. But there was no time to think. Another came from behind. Solara's tail snapped forward, wrapping the warrior's arm before he could strike Daniel. She yanked him off balance, her blade flashing to end the threat in a single stroke. She glanced back at Daniel, her eyes fierce. Good, she said simply, before turning back to the fight. The leader roared, his voice echoing off the cargo walls. He leapt towards Celera, claws raised high. Their blades clashed in a burst of sparks, the force driving Celera back a step. His strength was immense, his strikes wild but powerful. Celera blocked each blow, her muscles straining. Daniel watched in horror as the leader pressed her against the wall, their weapons locked. Celera's teeth bared as she held firm, but the claws inched closer. "Celera!" Daniel shouted. Without thinking, he charged, swinging his pipe at the leader's leg. The strike landed, hard enough to make the scaled warrior stagger. Celera seized the moment, twisting free and driving her blade into his chest. The leader collapsed with a roar that shook the hall, his blood pooling across the floor. The remaining warriors froze, their eyes wide with shock. Without their leader, their courage broke. They hissed, retreating into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had come. Silence fell, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. He dropped the pipe, his hands trembling. He stared at the blood on his clothes, unsure if it was his or theirs. Celera sheathed her blade slowly, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Her arms still bled, but her eyes burned brighter than ever. She stepped toward him, her tail brushing against his arm. "You fought beside me," she said, her voice low but steady. "Not because you were forced, but because you chose." Daniel swallowed hard. "I couldn't just watch you die." Her expression softened, just slightly. "That is the bond," she whispered. "Now it grows stronger." Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from the weight of her words. The bond was no longer just a tradition. It was something alive, something real. He had stepped into her fight, and now their fates were tangled together. In the shadows above, unseen eyes watched. A figure cloaked in black leaned against a railing, observing the aftermath. The figure's lips curled into a thin smile. The human and the Beastwoman had survived the ambush, but this was only the beginning. The station itself seemed to hum with new energy. Rumors would spread again, louder than before. The story of the human who fought beside a Beastwoman, who stood against enemies in the dark. And somewhere deep in Daniel's chest, fear turned into something else. Not courage yet, but the first spark of it. The cargo bay smelled of blood and oil, but by the next cycle, the entire station buzzed with something heavier than rumor. The word had spread like fire. A human had fought beside a Beastwoman. A Karathi oath had been declared in front of witnesses. The bond was now more than gossip. It was politics. Daniel tried to keep to himself, but the weight of countless eyes pressed on him wherever he walked. Merchants paused in their trading. Guards whispered behind armored helmets. Even children of alien families stared in wide-eyed silence as he passed. He was no longer invisible. He was a symbol of something no one fully understood. Celera walked at his side as always, her tail swaying, her wound from the battle wrapped in fresh cloth. She looked unshaken, her expression calm. But Daniel knew she had noticed the change too. The station was no longer simply watching them. It was deciding. The summons came at dawn, delivered by two uniformed officers of the station council. Their silver badges gleamed, their faces unreadable. "Daniel Hayes, Celera of Karath," one officer said. "The council demands your presence in the Grand Hall. Your case must be judged." Daniel's chest tightened. "Judged?" he asked. The officer only repeated, "The council awaits." The Grand Hall was nothing like the crowded markets or the shadowed cargo decks. It was vast, its walls carved from white alloy, polished so brightly they reflected the torches of artificial flame. Rows of alien delegates sat in curved tiers, their faces a sea of scales, fur, and metal. At the center stood a raised platform, where Daniel and Celera were led. The hall was filled with voices, layered in dozens of tongues. They quieted only when the High Chancellor, a tall being with translucent skin and veins glowing like rivers of light, raised his hand. "Silence," the Chancellor's voice rang. "Today we face a matter of grave weight. A bond has been declared between a human soldier and a warrior of Karath. Such a thing has not happened in living memory." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some voices scoffed, some whispered with awe, others hissed with open disgust. Daniel shifted uneasily. Celera stood unmoving, her tail wrapped lightly around her leg, her eyes fixed forward. She radiated certainty. while he felt like the ground beneath him was breaking. An insectoid delegate clicked its mandibles, its voice sharp. This bond threatens our order. The Karathi oath is sacred. To allow a human to hold it is to make a mockery of their traditions. A reptilian voice answered from across the hall. Or it may unite us. If a fragile human can carry the weight of the oath, perhaps it proves strength is not only in blood. Arguments flared. Voices overlapped. Claws and tendrils gestured wildly. The hall grew thick with tension. Finally, the Chancellor's glowing eyes turned to Daniel. Human, speak. Do you understand the bond you carry? Do you accept the oath that has been sworn upon you? Daniel froze. His throat went dry. He glanced at Celera, but she did not turn. She gave him no hint, only silence. I didn't choose this, Daniel said, his voice trembling. I touched her tail by accident. I didn't know it meant anything. I'm just a soldier, not worthy. A voice interrupted from the crowd, cruel and mocking. Laughter rippled through some corners. Daniel's fists clenched. Celera finally spoke, her voice steady as stone. He did not run when warriors struck. He stood when death came. He fought. Worthiness is not chosen in advance. It is proven in fire. The words silenced the laughter for a moment. Even the Chancellor seemed taken aback. Another delegate leaned forward, its metallic face gleaming. But the law is clear. The oath binds until death. The question is not whether the bond exists. It is whether we allow it to stand. The hall erupted again, voices rising like storm winds. Some demanded the bond be dissolved. Some demanded punishment. Some demanded that both be cast from the station. The Chancellor raised his glowing hand once more. Enough, he thundered. We will not decide by words alone. The bond must be tested. If the human and the Beastwoman can withstand trial, then the oath stands. If they fail, then the bond will be broken, and consequences will fall upon them both. Daniel's stomach dropped. Trial, he whispered. Solara's tail brushed against his hand, steady and grounding. Her amber eyes finally met his. Do not fear, she said quietly. This is the path of the bond. You are not alone. The Chancellor's voice boomed across the chamber. At the next cycle, the human and his Karathi oath keeper shall face the trial of shadows. If they endure, the council will honor their bond. If they fall, they will not leave this station alive. Gasps echoed through the hall. The trial of shadows was known even to Daniel. Whispered in military briefings, it was not ceremony, it was survival. Guards stepped forward, leading them back toward the doors. The sound of the council's voices followed them like a storm, some angry, some fearful, some filled with anticipation. As they left the grand hall, Daniel's knees threatened to buckle. He turned to Celera, his voice breaking. I don't even know what this trial is. Celera's expression softened, though her pride did not fade. Then you will learn, she said. You will see what it means to be bound to me, and I will see what it means to be bound to you. And as the doors shut behind them, the future of a human and a Beastwoman hung by the thinnest thread of fate. The council's words echoed in Daniel's mind long after they had left the grand hall. Trial of shadows. The phrase alone was enough to fill him with dread. He had heard whispers of it in hushed voices among soldiers, stories told late at night when no officer was near. None who had entered the trial spoke of it openly, and those who failed never returned. Celera walked beside him in silence as the guards led them through the station's endless corridors. Her presence was calm, her stride strong, but Daniel could feel the storm beneath her quiet exterior. She knew the danger, she knew the cost, and still she walked without fear. When the guards finally left them in a holding chamber, Daniel sank onto the cold bench. His hands trembled as he pressed his face into them. This is madness, he muttered. I'm just a soldier, not a champion, not some hero of stories. I don't even know what this trial is. Celera stood near the wall, her arms crossed, her tail coiling slowly around her waist like a living rope, her amber eyes fixed on him. You are more than you think, she said softly. The council does not see weakness in you. They see possibility. That is why they test us. Daniel laughed bitterly. Possibility? I only touched your tail, Celera. That's it. That one stupid mistake. Her voice cut through his despair, firm and sharp. No mistake, she said. Accident or not. You did not run when danger came. You did not abandon me when claws struck. You chose to fight. That choice is more important than any tradition. Daniel looked up at her, his eyes heavy with fear. But what if I can't make that choice again? What if I freeze? What if I fail you? Celera stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. She placed her clawed hand gently on his shoulder. Her touch was steady, grounding. Then I fall with you, she said. That is the oath. That is what you still do not understand. You are not alone in this. Her words struck deeper than any weapon. For the first time, Daniel realized the bond was not a chain binding him to her. It was a bridge, something that connected them both, something that gave them strength neither could claim alone. The door slid open with a hiss. A figure cloaked in gray entered, carrying a long staff of metal. His voice was old, crackling like stone on stone. The trial of shadows awaits, he said, his pale eyes glowing faintly. Prepare yourselves, for the station itself will be your judge. Daniel's stomach twisted. His legs felt heavy, but he stood. Celera moved to his side instantly, her presence like armor. Together they followed the gray figure through winding tunnels that descended deeper into the station. The air grew colder, the lights dimmed, replaced by flickering torches that cast long shadows. Daniel could hear the distant hum of machinery, like a heartbeat buried in the walls. Finally, they reached a massive steel door, etched with alien symbols that glowed faintly as the staff touched them. The door groaned open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. The space was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. A labyrinth of shifting platforms, pools of darkness, and towering constructs that moved as if alive. The shadows themselves seemed to breathe, curling like smoke. This, the gray figure said, his voice echoing, is where bonds are tested, not by words, not by counsel, but by survival. Enter, and prove that your bond is strength, not weakness. Daniel's knees wavered. He wanted to run, to turn back, to beg for another way. But when he looked at Celera, he saw no fear in her face, only certainty. She glanced at him, her tail brushing his hand like a silent vow. Whatever waits inside, she said, her voice steady. We face it together. You must decide now. Daniel, do you reject me, reject this bond, and let them tear us apart? Or do you accept it and step into the shadows with me? Her words hung in the cold air. Daniel's chest rose and fell as he stared into the darkness beyond the door. He thought of the council's eyes, the whispers of enemies, the claws that had already struck for him. He thought of Celera's blade flashing in the dark, her blood spilled for him, her oaths spoken without hesitation. Slowly, he reached out, his hand closing around hers. His grip was trembling, but firm. I accept, he said, his voice breaking but filled with resolve. I don't know if I can survive this, but I won't let you face it alone. Celera's amber eyes softened, her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then we walk as one, she whispered. Together, they stepped forward, crossing the threshold. The steel doors groaned shut behind them, sealing away the light. Ahead, the trial of shadows opened its endless dark maw. And for the first time, Daniel did not feel like prey. He felt the spark of something more, loyalty, courage, and a bond that no council, no enemy, and no shadow could easily break. The doors sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. The chamber was dark, alive with shifting shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. Strange platforms moved in silence, sliding over pools of black liquid. The air was heavy, damp, and full of echoes that did not belong to them. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His eyes struggled to adjust, every shape looking like a predator ready to strike. Beside him, Celera stood tall, her blade already drawn, the faint glow of its edge casting ripples across the dark floor. This place, Daniel whispered, it feels alive. Celera's ears twitched, her amber eyes narrowing. It is alive, she said quietly. The trial is not a puzzle, not a test built by hands. It is the station itself. It hunts, it pushes, it breaks. Only those who endure together leave alive. Her words settled deep in Daniel's chest. His hands trembled, but he clenched them into fists. He had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. The first sound came from above, a screech like tearing metal. Daniel looked up just as a shape dropped from the ceiling. A creature born of shadow and steel, its body twisted like smoke, but its claws gleamed sharp as real blades. Its face was a shifting mask, part beast, part machine. It lunged. Celera moved, her blade slicing through its smoky form. But instead of falling, the creature split into two. Both shadows hissed and circled, their claws dragging sparks against the floor. Daniel's heart pounded. He grabbed a piece of broken metal lying near his feet, holding it like a spear. "They're not real, right?" he shouted. Celera blocked another strike, sparks flying. "Real enough to kill," she answered. The shadows attacked together. Daniel thrust wildly, his makeshift weapon passing through one, but the other slammed into his chest, knocking him to the ground. Pain shot through him as claws raked across his uniform. He gasped, rolling away as Celera leapt between him and the creature. Her tail cracked like a whip, knocking the shadow back. She reached down, pulling him to his feet. "Stand," she commanded, her voice fierce but not unkind. "The bond is nothing if you fall." Daniel gritted his teeth, forcing his legs steady. "I'm not falling," he said, his voice shaking but determined. More shadows poured from the walls, crawling, hissing, twisting into monstrous forms. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting fear back at Daniel. He wanted to run. Every instinct screamed for it. But Celera stood unyielding, and something in him refused to abandon her. They fought side by side, Celera's blade flashing in arcs of light, Daniel swinging his jagged spear with clumsy but desperate strength. Every time he stumbled, Celera pulled him back. Every time her defense faltered, Daniel threw himself forward, striking wildly to cover her. The shadows howled, but each one they struck dissolved into black mist. The air grew heavier, the floor trembling beneath their feet. From the darkness ahead, a new shape emerged, larger than the rest, a towering beast of smoke and steel, its eyes like burning suns, its roar shaking the chamber. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. "We can't fight that," he whispered. Celera stepped forward, her blade glowing brighter. "We can, together," she said firmly. Her tail brushed his arm, a gesture of unity. "Do not doubt, Daniel, not now." The beast charged, its claws tore through the floor, sending shards of metal flying. Celera met its strike head-on, her blade sparking against its monstrous claw. The impact threw her back, her body slamming against the ground. "Celera!" Daniel shouted. He rushed forward without thinking, driving his spear into the beast's chest. The weapon sank deep into its smoky form, glowing as if it had caught fire. The beast howled, turning on him, claws raised. Daniel froze. But before the strike could fall, Celera was there again, her blade cutting across the beast's neck in a single, blinding arc. The creature shrieked, its form unraveling into mist, and then silence. Daniel collapsed to his knees, gasping. His body ached, his arms burned, but he was alive. He looked at Celera, who knelt beside him, blood on her lip but fire still in her eyes. "You didn't run," she said softly. "You fought, you stood, that is enough." Daniel managed a weak laugh. "I didn't have a choice." Celera shook her head, her amber eyes warm now. "There is always a choice. You chose me, and I chose you." The chamber trembled, the shadows melted away, the platform slid back into stillness. A light shone from above, bathing them in golden glow. The voice of the Chancellor echoed, distant but clear. "The bond has been tested. The trial of shadows accepts you." Daniel stared at the light, his chest heaving. Relief washed over him. Celera stood, pulling him up with ease, her tail wrapped briefly around his arm before sliding free. As the great doors opened once more, they stepped out together, battered but unbroken. The waiting crowd gasped, whispers rising like a storm. Some voices were filled with awe, others with disbelief, but no one could deny what they had seen. A human and a Beastwoman had entered the trial, and together they had endured. Celera raised her head proudly, her voice carrying through the hall. "The bond is forged in fire," she declared, "and it will not break." Daniel stood at her side, still shaking, still unsure of what the future held. But one truth had burned itself into his heart. He was no longer just a soldier lost in the galaxy. He was part of something greater, something unbreakable. And as the station roared with voices, both angry and amazed, he knew this was only the beginning of a story that would echo far beyond its walls.